Hello everybody and welcome to today's session on accessible design. Squiz is thrilled to be celebrating the 10th Global Accessibility Awareness Day. We thought there's no better way to get involved than to have a deeper look at some of the ways we can make sure that we're designing sites for everyone. My name's Peter Craig and I lead the creative services team across Australia and New Zealand. We focus on user experience and user interface and strategies and things like that. So it's very much the space that we kind of live and breathe in. And when we think about accessibility, this is really about making sure that we're building websites for everyone. Our world is diverse, so we have to just live in that and recognise that the people who use our websites are diverse. And so therefore, the way we design our websites really needs to reflect this and match the reality of the world that we're serving with our digital channels. And today we're focusing on accessible website design. So what does this mean? Well, it's about keeping humans at the very centre of everything that we design. And it's making sure that we're addressing any sort of discriminatory aspect related to UX for people with different levels of abilities. So together with the idea of usability and inclusion, accessible design is really critical for building websites for everyone. Just backtracking a bit, when I talk about usability, obviously I'm referring to the sort of the UX design side of things. And when I talk about inclusion, I'm referring to making sure that our websites speak to different demographics, different literacies, cultures, languages, internet connections, economic circumstances. So it's all these things that come together to help make sure that we're building websites for everyone. And because we're the digital professionals, it actually is our responsibility. And there's a terrific quote here from one of Australia's first senator to serve with a disability. And Senator Jordan Steele John, he said that really, disability is actually created by a collective failure to adapt to and embrace different levels of ability. So we really need to keep that in mind when we build websites. It's also, it's part of life. We all live with different levels of ability. So to put this in perspective though, statistics suggest that an estimated 1 in 5 Australians lives with disabilities. So that means if we don't get our websites right, we're making things hard or even impossible for 1 in 5 citizens, 1 in 5 local residents, 1 in 5 future and current students, 1 in 5 applicants, 1 in 5 customers. So you sort of get the picture. It's no one sector that benefits from making sure we're designing inclusive and accessible websites. So it's a really important focal point for the design process. It's good for your users. Every user will be able to complete tasks more easily on an accessible site. It doesn't matter about the device they're using or the technologies they're relying on. And certain elements will just really help everyone. Clean and clear design, simple, readable content, easy navigation, predictable behavior, all of those things help all users. It's good for your website itself. Accessible design principles really do sit very well with good UX outcomes. More people get more value from your site. Accessible websites tend to have better search engine optimization type metrics. Accessibility helps algorithms as much as it can help people. And ultimately, accessibility is just good for your business too. Whilst many state and federal governments actually mandate accessibility compliance in the web, in other sectors, it's not actually so clear-cut. And it's important, of course, to always remember that as well as making things hard or impossible for a good chunk of your audience, poor accessibility contributes to some of the things I've listed here. Customers are giving up, going elsewhere. You're missing opportunities for revenue, reducing self-service, spending more time and money supporting. So a lot of arguments for accessible websites. But today, we're talking about accessible design. So let's zero in on that for a little bit. As you've probably got the picture from what I've been saying so far, a lot of things work together to produce an accessible site. And this diagram suggests some of them, certainly not all of them. IAM content, ARIA labels and alt tags, HTML and code. But today, we want to focus on UI design, accessible design. So it's about layout, interaction, image, color, brand, and those sort of design-related choices that we make. And we make these choices not just when we're doing the hi-fi designs that are ready for build, but we also make these choices during wireframing and so on. So it really becomes this sort of thing that should color every stage of the design process. So my first tip, I'm going to go through a bunch of tips that I hope will sort of get you thinking about how you can make improvements to the way you approach accessibility. And the first one I'm going to mention is to look for co-design opportunities and test. And there's a really great quote there from the Nielsen Norman Group that says, you know, if you can only do one activity and aim to improve an existing system, do qualitative or think aloud usability testing. So this is about doing your research with the people who are going to use your site. Listen to them and learn from them. So when you're thinking about accessibility, you want to recruit people with different abilities and get them involved in usability testing with real-world tasks, and ideally involve them in co-design sort of processes. So you want to test your current site to see how it's doing, and test any sort of future designs as well. You can test them at the wireframe stage. It doesn't have to be fully functioning, but you'll learn a lot from just speaking to 5 people and giving them some tasks and observing what they do. In terms of recruiting participants, your organisation might have a committee that focuses on disability access or inclusion. That could be a really great place to start to get some participants, and it doesn't hurt to offer a bit of an incentive as well. Everybody likes their time to be recognised. My second tip is to build accessibility into your style guide. And I say this because we often see that style guides and brand colours actually don't always foster accessible experiences. And often this is around contrast. Things like light blues and light greens, if they're part of your brand and applied directly to a website in text or titles, they can be absolutely unreadable for people who are living with impaired vision. So it's super important to make sure that you're not adhering to your style guide to such an extent that you're actually excluding people. So it's always not lost. You can design secondary colour palettes or alternative ways of expressing the brand colours in a way that doesn't affect people being able to use the site. Next tip, design clear interaction states. So this is about the way the website responds to and reacts to rollovers and other sorts of interactions. We need to make sure users feel certain about what they have and haven't tapped on. This is both within the text and within the sort of navigation, that kind of thing. So you really want to think about your states for hover, for focus, for click, and for some visited links. These can be really helpful for all users. And we want to make sure as well that interactive elements have enough of a tappable area to make the interface easier to use. So you're not sort of trying to get in and tap tiny little links and that sort of thing. Just all helps accessibility. We want to support user flows and not disorientate people. And this sort of speaks to the fact that in some ways the web offers boundless potential for really cool visual treatments, animations and that kind of thing, but that doesn't mean we always should. I'm not saying that our sites should be boring by any means, but it is really important to remember that animations and motion and flyouts and suddenly revealed content actually can disorientate some users significantly and make it very hard for them to know where they are in the site or what's happening at any given time. So we really want to make sure that our top tasks can be completed, look, largely without the snazzy effects. By all means, do it, embellish a bit, but test. Do it carefully and test. And this also leads nicely into my next tip, which is about really the need for carefully designing navigation, because actually designing navigation is hard, particularly when you're looking at a variety of devices. So navigation can be impacted by the scale of your site, the IA, the information architecture, and what people actually need to achieve on your site. But there are some really, really good principles, and I've actually listed quite a few of them here. So make use of breadcrumbs. We see time and time again in usability testing that this actually is very useful for site users. Mega menus are an effective means of providing navigation, but we have to make sure that they behave smoothly, they support the tab-based, keyboard-based navigation, and that it's good to have them activated just a few hundred milliseconds after someone hovers over the menu to sort of be sure that that's what the user wants to do. There's nothing worse than just quickly hovering over something, a big menu flying up in your face. All users hate that. Avoid drop-down menus that take precision to navigate. So those ones where they drop down and then you have to move and then something else hovers out and you have to find it. Nobody wants to try that hard. And don't rely on logo links back to the home pages. It's another thing we see in testing. A lot of people don't know that the logo is often a link to the home page. Don't use hamburger menus on desktop. We know they hurt UX metrics across the board on that device. And beware of common mobile navigation pitfalls. For those accordion-based mobile navigation menus, don't use split buttons. By a split button, I mean where the little chevron or arrow does one thing and the label next to the chevron links somewhere else. That's a really disorientating way of setting up a mobile menu, and it makes the interface feel unpredictable to many users, really. And also tread carefully with sequential menus. So they're the ones that sort of one slides in, the next one comes in, the next layer down, and so on. They can be actually quite effective, but if the site gets really deep, they can become disorientating. And also it can sort of, some users will find themselves pressing the back button, which may not move the menu back, it may actually take them to a previous page. That's just not a great outcome. So some really good tips there to keep in mind when designing navigation. Oh, don't forget in-page navigation either. So we've sort of been talking previously about the global site navigation, but even within actual web pages, we need to make it easy to move around the current page. And there's a few things that really help us on the accessibility front. And one thing is a skip to content link. It really, really helps people using screen readers to bypass what can sometimes be very long lists of navigation-based links. So that's a really important one to include. And then tables of contents or sort of on this page components, they're really good too because they provide a sort of an at-a-glance sense of the scope of information on the page. That's useful for everyone. And they also provide really quick access to desired content. So they're a great one to include to support usability for everyone. Look, watch those tables and tabs. This one's really clear whenever we do testing, especially with people who rely on screen readers. Tables and tabs can be very, very challenging. It's not so bad if they're simple, as long as they've been correctly implemented with the right sort of tags and setup. But complex tables and tabs force people to really remember and associate rows and columns and tab states, and it can be very, very challenging. So if you are presenting this sort of complex data, it's great to sort of consider if there's an alternative way of doing it, maybe a different way of laying it out, or you might be able to come up with a search or a decision tree-based interface that helps people arrive at that complex information through sort of simpler flows. And this is another one, just be sure to test, particularly if this sort of complex information forms the part of key user tasks for the site. Here's another good one, design prompts and error states carefully. Strays a bit into content territory, but we just, we're often thinking even at wireframing stage what the key headlines or headings, or calls to action and that sort of thing might be. So it's always good to ask yourself, if I don't have the support of these visual elements around these prompts or error states, does it still make sense? Because it can be very hard to guess what the meaning of some poorly worded states actually are, including form validation messages and that sort of thing. And remember those UX heuristics. So in particular, the heuristic where you should strive for aesthetic and minimalist design. So this is one of the principles that really informs good user experience. And so, as that definition from Nielsen Norm Group there says, your interface should only include the necessary elements that have high informational value. So I'm not talking about the minimalism design trend. This is about really only presenting what is absolutely necessary on the page, however you actually wish to style it. And the reason this is important for accessibility is that sometimes the bells and whistles or the additional extraneous sort of information can actually be really challenging or very, very annoying on a screen reader. And also for anyone trying to make sense of the site quickly. I love this one, and if we've got any developers watching today, thank you for all the great work you do. Ask the developers. They are often a wealth of knowledge regarding accessibility. And I did ask some of our developers here at Squiz for some common pitfalls, and here they are listed. Some insufficient color contrast, caused by that brand color adherence. Illegible text over banner images, and particularly when there hasn't been enough consideration for design on different screen sizes, like responsive design. Undefined interactive states for elements and links, they see from time to time, as well as problems with keyboard browsing. If it's progressing in an illogical order, a user needs to use the keyboard to navigate the site and they tab, and it sort of doesn't support the natural flow of the page. That's a pitfall to watch out for. Non-decorative images, lacking captions, and videos lacking transcripts is an issue. And no controls for auto-playing videos, no controls for rotating carousels, and no controls for page elements which automatically change. So this refers to content that the user can't control. If we sort of think, oh great, they want to see a rotating carousel, they may not. They may want to press pause, they may not know where they are. So it's about control, it's about orientation, it's about giving people the ability to know exactly, or to do exactly what they want to do with the site. And of course, we need to get to know and make use of our accessibility tools. So Squiz, Funnelback and Matrix have native accessibility tools. You can run colour combinations through contrast checkers, such as the ones I've listed here. And it's great to have accessibility checklists, and I think they're really useful, but they've got to be used alongside real human user experience, because by themselves, they can become a bit tick the box if you're not careful. And did I say test? Yes, I did. Let's say it again. Keep humans at the centre of your design decisions. Anytime you have a chance to involve them in co-design or involve them in any sort of usability activities or interviews, you're only going to get better outcomes. So I just can't recommend this strongly enough. So thank you. I've just run through a list of, I guess, some really tips that I would consider quite handy, really, for developing websites that include everyone. So I hope that it's been provided some food for thought and inspires you to make improvements in the accessibility space. And I'd be only too happy to have a chat with you if you wanted to reach out, so please feel free to do so. Thanks very much for your time.